Imagine for a second the pristine, glittering world of 1990s figure skating. Like, when you close your eyes, you probably picture the sequins, the perfect smiles, the effortless grace, right? Just gliding across the ice like gravity doesn't even exist.
Oh, absolutely. It's a carefully manufactured illusion. We see that final polished 3 minutes of a televised routine, and we completely miss the thousands of hours of literal blood, sweat, and psychological warfare that went into creating that tiny window of perfection.
Right, and today's deep dive is it's gonna shatter that illusion completely. We were pulling from a really fascinating source today, the memoir Bobek, The Wild One, which was co-authored by figure skater Nicole Bobek alongside Todd Fisher and Keaton Ferrigno.
And what makes this book so compelling is really how it was born. In early 2025, as part of her own intense healing journey, Bobek sat down for 27 hours of raw, tear-filled interviews.
Yeah, 27 hours. That is a lot of tape.
It is. And those interviews, they stripped away decades of public relations spin. What we are left with in this text is a highly vulnerable look at the extreme sacrifices, the toxic environments, and the sheer grit it takes to survive as a child prodigy who, honestly, absolutely refuses to fit the traditional polite mold.
Okay, let's unpack this, because Nicole's story doesn't start in some elite, pristine country club. It starts in 1977 in a cramped third-floor walk-up apartment on Pine Grove Avenue in gritty pre-gentrification Chicago.
Right, and her family dynamic was entirely unconventional for the era, which immediately set her apart. She was raised by her single mother, Jana, and her mother's best friend, Aunt Joyce. So you have two single mothers banding together to raise their kids under one roof, pooling whatever limited resources they had.
And from the very beginning, Nicole is this hyperactive toddler. She's completely fearless. Her mom actually pulled her out of gymnastics at age 2 because she was genuinely terrified Nicole's impulsive nature was going to cause her to snap her own neck on the equipment.
Which was a highly justified fear. But that same reckless fearlessness found its perfect outlet when they put her on the ice at age 3. I mean, the moment her blades touched the rink, it was obvious to everyone watching. She wasn't just good for a toddler, she was a prodigy.
Yeah.
The way she intuitively understood edges, balance, musicality, it was immediate and undeniable.
But the reality of feeding that prodigy-level talent is just absurd. Like, if you think your morning commute is tough, consider this. By the time she was 6 years old, her daily schedule involved waking up in the pitch dark, being strapped into the car by 5:09 a.m. for compulsory figures.
Which is brutal.
It is. For those who don't know, that is literally just tracing figure eights on the freezing ice in complete silence for almost an hour. Then a quick abbreviated stint at a regular school, followed by intense ballet training, and then right back to the ice for free skate practice.
It's relentless.
Exactly.
Oh.
This 6-year-old had the daily schedule of a Fortune 500 CEO, but instead of chasing quarterly profits, she was chasing the perfect edge.
And her mother literally had to bribe her with the promise of trips to the toy store to pick out Cabbage Patch dolls just to keep her motivated through that grueling routine.
But wait, I have to stop you there. Because figure skating is famously a sport for the ultra-wealthy. Ice time, custom boots, elite coaches. How on earth does a single mother in a third-floor walk-up afford any of this?
It required an incredible, exhausting hustle. To afford all of it, Jana and Aunt Joyce ran an ice cream truck in Chicago.
And we aren't talking about a pristine corporate franchise here.
No, not at all.
This was a pastel-colored, rickety ice cream truck that was constantly breaking down on the side of the road. Aunt Joyce would literally be under the hood, cranking away at the engine with a wrench, while her mom tried to flag down neighborhood customers just to pay for the next week of ice time.
It sounds like a quirky indie movie, I know, but it highlights a harsh psychological reality. When you specialize that early in life and you possess that much raw, undeniable talent, you immediately become a target. She was a massive threat to the established order of those local Chicago rinks.
Oh, for sure.
That early isolation from a normal childhood, combined with the intense resentment from other wealthier skating families, really set the stage for her outsider identity. It was the genesis of her wild reputation, simply because she didn't belong to their club.
Which brings us to the inevitable cross-country move. Because outgrowing your local rink in figure skating is kind of like being a brilliant indie filmmaker who suddenly gets thrown onto a ruthless Hollywood studio lot. You have the raw talent, but you don't know the politics, and everyone there wants to see you fail. For Nicole, Leveling up meant moving to California.
And this move was as chaotic as you'd expect from their family dynamic. They sold basically everything they owned, including that beloved ice cream truck.
The logistics of this are wild to me. Aunt Joyce is driving a beat-up white minivan packed with their lives across the country, while Nicole and her mom fly into LAX. This is the 1980s, so there are no cell phones, no GPS.
Right, completely off the grid.
Exactly. They get completely separated. Nicole and her mom are sitting on a curb outside the airport for hours with all their worldly possessions, while Aunt Joyce is frantically pumping quarters into a payphone in the middle of the Mojave Desert, trying to cage them at the airport terminal.
They eventually reunite, of course, and settle in Redondo Beach. Though, settle is a strong word, considering the three of them were living in the basement of her new coach, Barbara Rolls. They were literally doing math lessons in this basement when the Whittier earthquake hit.
Imagine that. You just moved from Chicago, you don't even know what an earthquake feels like, and suddenly the earth is violently shaking and glass is shattering upstairs. But honestly, the earthquake was nothing compared to the reality of the California ice rinks.
The contrast here is incredibly striking. You'd assume that Southern California, the hub of Olympic hopefuls, would have these glamorous, state-of-the-art athletic facilities.
But it's a post-apocalyptic nightmare. They're driving to the Torrance rink, which the book describes as smelling intensely of stale cigars with ice that is literally wet and sweating because the cooling system is failing.
It's awful.
Or they go to the Van Nuys rink, which was basically a rotting barn where you had to sign a legal liability waiver just to step inside the building. The floorboards were warped and left rust-stained splinters in the skaters' clothes. Water would constantly drip from the ceiling and freeze on the rink, forming an actual ice stalagmite that the skaters just had to dodge mid-routine like a traffic cone.
It's absurd. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this is a sport that demands absolute aesthetic perfection. Every hair must be in place, every physical line must be flawless. Yet the physical infrastructure they were relying on to build that perfection was quite literally decaying around them.
It's the ultimate irony. They are performing a sport obsessed with absolute visual perfection inside buildings that are literally caving in on them. And somehow, the parents of the other skaters were even more toxic than the rotting buildings.
Well, ice time was an incredibly scarce resource, and that scarcity bred a brutal turf war environment.
You had grown adult stage moms, screaming in the face of this little kid, accusing Nicole of stealing their daughter's music just because the public rink happened to play the same track on the loudspeakers. Parents were actively lobbying the local skating clubs to change the rules about ice time specifically to hold Nicole back.
But psychologically, surviving this hostile environment did something crucial for her development as an athlete. When you are constantly under attack from external forces, whether it's dodging an ice stalagmite or navigating an angry stage parent, you quickly stop looking for external validation.
Right.
It forced her to rely entirely on her own internal fire. It cemented her identity as a true outsider, someone who skates purely for herself because she knows no one else in that building is going to protect her.
But to navigate that kind of cutthroat world, you need a guide, right? You need a coach. And finding that perfect fit is an incredibly messy trial and error process.
Oh, the coaching carousel is a massive part of elite sports. It's a common misconception that finding a coach is a simple, linear progression upward where you just hire the most famous person you can afford.
Right. Like at one point, Nicole is training with Frank Carroll, who is an absolute legend in the skating world, a master technician. But despite all his prestige and his pedigree, he just cannot get her to land the highly coveted double axel.
And we should probably explain why the double axel is such a massive gatekeeper in figure skating.
Good point, yeah.
It is the only jump where the skater takes off facing forward. Because you jump facing forward but land facing backward, it requires an extra half rotation in the air compared to every other jump. It completely scrambles a skater's spatial awareness. It's terrifying.
Exactly. It's a mental block as much as a physical one.
Yeah.
And Frank Carroll just couldn't break through that block with her. So they pivot. And this is where the story takes a fascinating, deeply unconventional turn. They start driving 6 hours on the weekends, all the way to Sacramento, staying in cheap Motel 6s, just to train with a guy named Robbie Bradshaw.
Which is such a wild departure.
It is. Now, Robbie isn't a famous Olympic coach. He literally works behind the counter in the jewelry store. He's a former skater who just happened to be helping someone out as a favor. But they beg him to help Nicole. And within a single month, she lands the double axel perfectly.
Which is a brilliant case study in the psychological dynamic of a coach-athlete relationship. Frank Carroll was undeniably a master, but his rigid teaching style simply didn't align with Nicole's chaotic, intuitive learning style. Robbie Bradshaw figured out how to translate the physics of the jump into a language her specific brain could understand.
It totally challenges the idea of the magic ticket coach. We see this in our own careers all the time. We assume the most famous expert, the person with the shiniest resume, is the best teacher. But sometimes you don't need the person with the most accolades, you just need the person who understands how your brain works. The jewelry store worker unlocked what the Olympic legend couldn't.
And that's vital for anyone to understand. Changing coaches or changing mentors in your career isn't a failure. It's an evolution. You outgrow people or you realize you need a completely different key for a different lock.
And her evolution soon takes her to Colorado to train with Carlo Fassi at the legendary Broadmoor World Arena. Now, this is the big leagues. We are talking strict, old-school dress codes. Female skaters had to wear dresses every single day on the ice, absolutely no exceptions. The pressure is immense, but she is thriving under it. She is winning competitions.
She's doing so well, in fact, that she catches the eye of George Steinbrenner, the famously fiery and impulsive owner of the New York Yankees.
He watches her skate and is so blown away by her raw power that he pulls out his checkbook and writes a massive sponsorship check right there on the spot. It feels like a movie scene.
It really does. But as with all things in elite sports, there is always a catch.
There's always a catch. The catch is that her coach, Carlo Fassi, has just accepted a lucrative job to open a brand new rink in Milan, Italy. And he basically tells Nicole's mom, you can have the Steinbrenner check, but she's coming to Italy. He's taking the money and the skater with him.
It really highlights the total lack of agency athletes often have at that age. The adults make the financial deals, and the athlete simply goes where they are told.
So off they go to Milan. And talk about massive culture shock.
Yeah.
They were living in this tiny, cramped apartment where the walls are paper thin. The bathtub is literally sitting in the middle of the kitchen.
That is just so bizarre.
Right. And Aunt Joyce is driving her tiny manual Italian car through the narrow, chaotic streets of Milan like she's a Formula One racer, squeezing between city buses with literally an inch to spare.
It's an incredibly vivid period of her life, but it's very short-lived. The Steinbrenner money eventually runs out. They can't legally work in Italy to make more, and suddenly they have to pack up everything and head right back to Colorado.
But here's the flaw in the rebel against the system strategy. You can outskate your rivals, and you can outstubborn your coaches, but you absolutely cannot outrun your own biology. And right as she's peaking, Bobek's body completely turns on her.
First, in a very acute, terrifying medical crisis.
Yeah, when she's just 12 or 13 years old, she wakes up with a stabbing, blinding pain in her stomach. The doctors initially think it's appendicitis, but it turns out to be a massive ovarian tumor.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she goes in for immediate surgery. It's benign, thankfully. But during a routine follow-up procedure, something goes horribly wrong. She starts hemorrhaging, gushing blood. A code blue is called in the hospital. She literally flatlines and nearly dies on the operating table.
The sheer fragility of life is suddenly thrust upon a young teenager whose biggest concern, just days prior, was landing a triple toe loop.
At 12, most kids are worrying about middle school drama, and she's surviving a code blue. She wakes up in the ICU, surrounded by tubes and beeping machines. And in this incredibly surreal, somewhat lighthearted twist to a very dark moment, she finds a get-well photograph on her hospital nightstand from Hulk Hogan.
A bizarre, amazing detail that perfectly encapsulates the weirdness of her life.
And somehow, mysteriously, the hospital drops the massive, crippling medical bills. The local news had run with the dramatic story of the skater who nearly died, and it seems someone, or the hospital administration itself, quietly absorbed the astronomical cost.
She survives, she heals, and she incredibly returns to the ice. But her body is about to rebel in a second, entirely natural way: puberty.
Oh man, it hits her like a freight train. For any teenager, this is a confusing, awkward time. But for an elite figure skater, it is an absolute mechanical crisis.
We have to understand the physics of figure skating to grasp how devastating this is. The sport demands a prepubescent, incredibly linear physique for maximum rotational speed. When a young woman goes through puberty, her hips widen, her chest develops, and her center of gravity completely shifts downward.
Right, the physics change entirely.
Yes. Her muscle memory is suddenly utterly useless. She has to entirely relearn how to balance and jump in a body that feels foreign to her.
It's like trying to win a Formula One race. But the mechanics are actively changing the weight distribution and shape of your engine mid-lap, and the judges are shaming you for slowing down.
That is exactly what happens. This raises an important question about the systemic, deeply ingrained issues within aesthetics-based sports. When nature takes its course, the sport universally penalizes the female athlete, rather than adapting its expectations to adult human biology.
The cruelty of it is staggering. She's constantly hearing whispers from the judges, from the parents in the stands, even from coaches, saying things like, she's gotten too heavy, she's lost her lines, what happened to her?
The sheer physics of her sport are changing under her feet, and instead of structural support or technical guidance, she receives immense moral judgment. It breeds this profound, isolating insecurity. She begins to feel that while she still deeply loves skating, the sport simply no longer wants her.
So how do you react when the sport you love tells you you're unwanted? For Nicole, that isolation pushes her completely away from the pristine ice princess mold. She's back at a regular high school in Colorado, and she's just trying to survive. And kids can be brutal when they sense weakness.
The bullying she endures reaches a physical, violent boiling point.
A group of popular girls corners her in the school bathroom. They scream in her face, shove her, and actually beat her up, breaking her nose. She just stands there and takes it, probably paralyzed by the shock of it all. But something inside her fundamental psychology shatters that day.
That's the pivot point. That is the exact moment the rebel identity fully takes over.
Shortly after the bathroom incident, she's at a school football game with her one real friend. A girl starts aggressively taunting her friend, and Nicole just snaps. She pushes the bully straight down the bleachers. Not enough to severely injure her, but enough to violently shock everyone watching, and ironically, that singular act of retaliation earns her the absolute respect of the entire school. The whispers completely stop.
It's a fascinating sociological shift. She realizes that playing by the rules of polite society, or the polite subservient rules of the skating world, only makes her a victim.
So she leans all the way in. She starts wearing heavy combat boots over fishnets, even in 80-degree weather. She dyes her blonde hair jet black with bright red purple streaks. She's smoking clove cigarettes behind the gym, blasting 9-inch nails. She's fully, unapologetically embracing the wild child persona she'd been labeled with for years.
And, predictably, that aggressive persona invites even further hostility from the deeply conservative traditional skating community.
Oh, absolutely. When she's 17, her mom and sponsors scrape together enough to buy her a car, an Infiniti G20. It's her first taste of real, tangible freedom. But the very next morning, she walks out to find it completely vandalized by jealous skating rivals.
Just terrible.
It is covered in wet cat food and toilet paper. And written across the windshield in bright red lipstick is the word slut, alongside cruel taunts about her failing jumps.
It's a physical manifestation of the intense resentment and jealousy she faced daily. They wanted to break her spirit.
But what does she do? She doesn't quit. She doesn't cry. She grabs a hose, scrubs the lipstick off the glass, gets in, and keeps driving. Which perfectly sets the stage for the ultimate showdown, the 1995 U.S. National Championships in Providence, Rhode Island.
This is the crucible. Everything she has endured leads to this specific competition.
The contrast at this event is incredibly cinematic. On one side, you have Michelle Kwan. Flawless, highly disciplined, perfectly predictable. Frank Carroll is her coach, standing proudly by the boards. Her dad is handing out warm donuts to everyone at practice. Michelle is a golden girl, the perfectly tuned symphony.
And on the other side, you have Nicole, the wild card, the chaotic drum solo you didn't see coming.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Nicole doesn't go into that arena trying to beat Michelle by being Michelle. She knows she can't out-polish her. She can't out-polite her. So she decides to lean entirely into her own chaotic magic. She realizes her unpredictability, her raw fire, the sheer fact that she survived the very things people criticize her for are actually her absolute superpowers.
It's a profound psychological moment of self-acceptance. She stops trying to fragment herself into the good, polite skater and the angry rebel. She finally integrates the two. True champions don't ignore their physical scars or their rebellious streaks. They integrate them directly into their performance.
She is standing alone in her hotel room, right before the short program, looking at her costume. It's this stunning white and gold chiffon dress that shimmers like moonlight. She puts it on, looks in the mirror, and right beneath the sheer fabric on her ribs, she sees the surgical scar from when she nearly died on the operating table.
Wow.
And instead of feeling shamed or trying to hide it with makeup, she feels reverence. She realizes that scar is the physical line between the 12-year-old girl who could have died and the woman who was about to step onto the ice and skate for a national title. She survived the rotting, decaying rinks, the broken nose in the bathroom, the ICU, the lipstick on her windshield. All of it.
The story of Nicole Bobek, as detailed in these interviews, isn't really about landing a double axel or winning medals. It is a masterclass in surviving a machine that is fundamentally designed to crush individuality and finding a way to thrive despite it.
It's about finding ultimate freedom by completely unapologetically owning your messy, wild, authentic self. If you're listening to this, I want you to ask yourself, where in your own life are you trying to shrink yourself to fit into a mold that someone else built for you? What would happen if you stopped apologizing for who you are and actually embraced the wild parts of your personality instead?
It's a powerful framework for evaluating our own careers, our own passions, and the spaces we inhabit.
And speaking of spaces, I want to leave you with one final lingering image from the book. The legendary Broadmoor World Arena in Colorado. The grand place where Nicole trained with Carlo Fassi, where she bled on the freezing ice, where she skated in historic costumes to sweeping live orchestras that doesn't exist anymore. It was entirely demolished and paved over to build a golf course. But before it fell, Nicole managed to save 2 beat-up, scratched metal chairs from the arena seating. They sit in her home today.
A physical, tangible remnant of a completely vanished world.
It leaves you pondering. When the physical spaces that shaped our identities are completely erased from the world, how do we carry that history forward? Do our memories live in the physical objects we managed to save? Or do they live in the scars we carry on our bodies? Because beneath the glittering, frozen surface of our lives, it's the gritty reality of what we survived that truly defines us.